We are in Newton, Iowa, and look, there's snow everywhere.
In this case, we have two very young victims.
17 and 20, and the case is 31 years old.
20-year-old Stephen Fisher and 17-year-old Melissa Gregory were murdered on March 3rd, 1983. Stephen Fisher was ambushed when he stepped outside of his trailer at the Copper Dollar Ranch.
One inside the trailer, one's outside the ramp.
The one difference in this case is how brutal these murders were, though, on both of them.
Their skulls were crushed in.
Stephen is married to Teresa Fisher.
Teresa, known to her friends and family as Terry, had all the reason in the world to want something bad to happen to Stephen. Steve and Terry's marriage was rocky at best, and Steve was dating Melissa at the time they were murdered. But there also was that whole drug angle that sort of clouds it all.
Is there some kind of message being sent?
After Melissa and Stephen were found murdered, people thought drug activity at Copper Dollar Ranch had something to do with it.
This case truly is stuck in the middle of two complete different stories.
It's going to have to be one of the old witnesses finally saying something different because their conscience gets to them. Johnny Bonds has experience interviewing people involved in the drug world, so he's going to bring that into this case to help us figure out if this is a drug-related murder case or not.
The only thing we can do is stay positive and give it all we got like we always do.
Okay, Pollyanna.
Come on now.
It has been 16 years and still no answers.
Police consider her killing a cold case.
Years later, the case is still unsolved.
There are so many cold cases out there just waiting to be solved.
The crime scene ultimately tells the story of the murder.
We want to bring justice to these victims. Oh, hey, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm Kelly.
Hi, Kelly. John Halferty.
Nice to
I'm the
meet
sheriff.
you.
Adam DeCamp.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Mike,
Oh,
nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. Hello.
Hey!
Morning, sir. John Halferty.
Johnny Bond.
Nice to meet you.
How many murders do y'all have in Jasper County?
Often we don't have a single murder.
Wow.
I remember even back in 1983, it was a shock, and it was a double homicide. So it had an effect on the community. It had a lot of people questioning their safety and what was going on.
You were a kid when this happened?
I was, yes. I knew the victims.
Really?
Yes. You know, my memory of Melissa is 7th or 8th grade. We had to sit next to each other. I was actually a pretty shy kid in school, and I remember her sitting next to me, and for a girl to talk to me at that age, you know, I was like, you know, I didn't know what to say, but I just remember she was very friendly, had a, you know, great smile.
So Melissa was 17.
Yes.
Okay. And then how old was Stephen?
Stephen was 20. He was, you know, a little ornery, a little wild, but obviously none of his behavior should have resulted in what happened to him. You know, he's just in the prime of his life. There were two thoughts. One was that it was a drug-related, like a retaliation, and the second thought was that Teresa and her family may be involved.
Okay. Steve was married to Terry Sapino, but their marriage was falling apart, so he started dating Melissa. To be honest, Steve kind of played both of them, didn't he?
He did. Not to justify, but, you know, he was 20 years old at the time.
Steve and Terry were no longer living together. She was living with her brother Carlo, and Steve was living in a trailer at the Copper Dollar Ranch where he also worked. What did y'all start hearing about the ranch when all this came bubbling up?
We heard that cocaine was transported inside of horses and the horses died.
Steve was known to have had at least one prior incident of working with the police as a drug informant. Did he snitch on somebody that was so mad that they wanted to kill him, and then in the middle of killing Stephen, killed Melissa because she was a witness? So that brings in the owner of the ranch, Hal Snedeker, as our first suspect. He does have a solid alibi for the night of the murder, but we still think he could be involved. Steve worked for him at the ranch.
Yeah.
They had him do
He knew the secrets.
He did at least one, if not multiple
trips to Florida.
From Florida and brought back.
Steve did drug runs for him. And he knew Steve was a snitch. We also have to consider the possibility that Steve was killed not for something that he did to Hal, but for something Hal did to someone else. And that person wanted to send a message to Hal by killing the kid who lived there on the ranch.
If this was in retaliation for something he had done in Florida, at some point he would have been told that.
How do we know he wasn't?
Well, we don't, and that's something we need to talk to him about when we talk to him.
All right, so y'all talk about Terry. She's our second suspect. What do we want to put first?
Motive. Jealous, angry.
She puts herself there that night.
I mean, like within hours. Although Steve was running around with Melissa, he was still telling Terry they were going to get back together. And in her very first statement, Terry said that she went out there to talk to Steve because they were going to go look for an apartment together, but he blew her off. That apartment thing is the main thing. She thinks they're moving on together.
Right. Well, they're separated. They're still having sex, so
He's using her.
Yes.
You know, we know the family did not want her with him.
Terry's family had a history of violent encounters with Steve, and it was Terry's twin brother, Tim, who drove her out to the ranch that night. Okay, Tim.
He was the brother she went to when she needed a ride or she was having marital issues.
He could be maybe the most angry because he probably knows the most of all the family members.
Knows all the dirt on
Yeah,
it.
he
Everyone's
knows.
got a breaking
Yeah.
point.
But he was out there by his own admission that night.
Okay. This case has the unusual complication of truly half the people in this county think that it was drug-related, and the other half think that it has to do with Stephen's estranged wife. This case has hung over this town for 31 years. The Jasper County Sheriff's Office has never given up on this case, and we're optimistic that we can do something to move it forward this week.
We're hoping for some resolution. It's been long enough for the families.
I'm Kelly. Today we're meeting with both Melissa and Steve's family. They've been connected all these years because of what happened with the murders back then. Talk about Stephen. Let's talk about him.
He was a clown.
Yeah.
He was y'all's baby brother.
Yeah, and I babied him.
Can you remember some good stories to talk about with Melissa?
She was very spunky. I mean, she had no care in the world.
Energetic.
Yeah,
I mean,
energetic.
That's kind of how Stephen and her click so much, because
Yeah.
both of them full of life.
You remember all of that night?
She wanted to take the car so that way she could come back. And I told her no, because Mom needed the car to pay for her rent the next day.
She didn't want to come back home anyway that night. You don't need to feel bad about that. She was in love and wanted to stay with her boyfriend. You should not feel bad about the car.
I don't anymore.
And how did it all affect your mom?
It made my mom crazy. She dwelled on it.
I mean, your mom called us all the time. You know, we talked to her all the time.
It consumed her completely.
Toward the end of their lives, Ida, who's Melissa's mom, was living in the same nursing home as Thelma, who is Stephen's mom.
I remember Thelma, and she grabbed me and brought me down, you know, to her face, you know, and said, "It may not be long for me, but I want you to keep at this." Mom never talked about... Mom never talked. She never talked.
So your mom's way of dealing with it was to never talk about it, and your mom's way of dealing with it was to obsess about it. Y'all are handling it a little differently, I hope. Trying not to let it consume you.
Yeah, the first couple, 2 or 3 years was the toughest, probably.
Quit school over it, you know, because I got tired of going to school and people asking me, you know, about it, and then I just break down and cry, and, you know, it had to go away.
When you lose a loved one, I think it scars you for the rest of your life. You can feel the pain coming from both families, and they're all victims. What's it like being in the town when everybody knows?
There was so much fear there. I mean, even to this day, I can't go to the garbage can without worrying, because they're still out there.
We're so sorry for what all you've been through.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about her.
We're going to try our very hardest, but you can't promise anything.
The ranch where Melissa and Stephen were killed has since been sold off. But incredibly, we have located the trailer that Stephen was living in and are bringing it back here to recreate the crime scene. Unfortunately, a snowstorm was blown in, shutting down the entire town, making it impossible to set the trailer up where it was 30 years ago. We do have a crime scene video that we can watch that they took the day of the murders.
Just push that button and it'll, okay, just walk to the left and walk to the left. Walk out this,
The scene at the Copper Dollar Ranch was the most brutal, bloody, gory, unfortunately very memorable scene. Most of us don't need to look at the crime scene pictures. We can picture it in our heads.
right there.
We know that Tim Sapino drove his sister Terry out to the ranch that night, but seeing how violent the scene was makes me wonder if maybe he was also involved in that part of the crime. I just don't think a girl's doing that much damage.
I don't know. There's some pretty mean girls, too. The problem with only watching the video is that we can't truly get a sense of the space inside the trailer. Hopefully the weather will let up soon and we can see it with our own eyes.
We are investigating the murder of 20-year-old Stephen Fisher and 17-year-old Melissa Gregory, who were both brutally murdered 31 years ago. Although the weather has kept us from being able to go out and take a look at the crime scene, a crime scene video the police took that very day has given us a perspective on what happened.
Whose house is that?
The Ham house, Rita Ham.
So the neighbors aren't that far.
All those neighbors on the houses close by. Do you think that they would come down if you tried to nicely sweet talk them?
I think so.
Mr. Sheriff?
Everything's fine, everything's fine. You want something to drink?
I'm good.
Rita Ham lived next door to the Copper Dollar Ranch where Steve and Melissa were killed, and she was one of the first ones to the scene that morning.
You were actually the closest neighbor to where the murders happened.
Yes, it was. Jeff Ellingworth will take care of the horses. And I opened the door, and he's crying. And he said, Stevie and Sissy is dead. I walked across the grass with Jeff, and at that point I seen Steve laying on the ground. I thought he had a shirt on because the blood was so brown. No cell phones during that day.
Yeah.
So I would have walked back across to my house, and I called Sheriff's Department.
Is it the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, it is.
This is John Ham. House minister owns the horse farm that's right next door to our house. And the people that work there are dead. One's inside the trailer, one's outside the ground.
House nigger. Now, where's he living?
Personally, I don't like House Snedeker. He's shady.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that place, the horse place. You know, there's been talk of drug trafficking. Did you see anything that you thought was inappropriate?
House Snedeker had always been one that people could go to for dope. And I always was real suspicious of big semi-loads of hay that would come in for a few horses.
Okay.
And I was actually told that sometimes the hay was brought in with drugs in it. And then a couple of times there were horses that were dead and they would like have their stomach open. People would say they carry drugs in their horses.
Hearing all those rumors about drugs being found inside of the horses, it raises all kind of suspicions about whether or not Steve was involved in the drug activity at the Copper Dollar Ranch. So we need to find out more about what Stephen and Melissa were like back then.
We're gonna go in this room right here.
This one?
Yeah.
Sandy Vincent was friends with Melissa, and she also knew Steve very well. Talk about Melissa.
She was a good friend to me. Yes. I cannot think of anybody who disliked her. Now, I can think of a lot of people that didn't like Stevie, and I don't even know what she saw in him. He was a puke. He got caught taking kilos of drugs out of these horses, and he was selling them. But Stephen was well known as being a snitch. He was well known for telling the police to get out of trouble.
With Stephen's reputation as a snitch and the rumors around town about Hal Snedeker's involvement in drug activities, it's becoming more and more apparent that this could all be drug-related.
I'm going to kind of let you start and say, look, I'm new to this, like you have been.
Exactly. And a lot of questions not in there I want to ask.
Right.
Suspect Hal Snedeker has agreed to come in and talk to us today. There's a lot of questions about his possible connection in this case. We need to get some answers. I don't care if he brought in 1 million tons of dope back in 1983, statute of limitations ran out. But there's a lot of stuff that's unanswered I need to ask you about.
I've done a lot of things in my past, and I'm just going to tell you the truth from here on in. You just ask me whatever you want to ask me. I don't care what happens.
All right. Initially, Hal was considered the suspect. And in fact, one of the officers at the scene that day accused him of doing this because Steve was an informant for the local police.
Well, what do you know about that?
The only thing I know about that is what I found out the day I walked up and Stephen was laying there on the ground and Ververs looked at me and he goes, "You found out, didn't you?" And I said, "Found out what?" "You found out he was working for us, so you took care of the problem." I said, "Oh, bull. There's a whole lot of things about my life I'm not real proud of, but I'm not that."
All right, let's go back to the night this happened. Did you know that Steve was staying out there?
Yes.
Okay.
I let him stay there in the camper.
In September, he's narking on people. I'd be scared to death to have this kid do anything for me.
If I was doing anything.
Didn't you send Steve down to Florida with the payment one time?
No.
You sent him on an airplane with $36,000 cash?
No, I would have never had him do something like that. Not in a million friggin' years.
We know Hal's lying about this because he's contradicting his own sworn statement he gave years ago. Question, did Steve Fisher make trips to Florida for you in relations to marijuana traffic? Hal, he did. I had him fly to Florida once with a bunch of cash to pay for a load that I received. I believe it was $36,000. You're saying no, you didn't say it, but you can see here you did say it.
I don't remember that at all. They kept trying to tie all this drug running in with this, and there was no part of it.
When looking at the drug aspect of this case, we're not only looking at Hal as a suspect, we're also looking at the possibility that Stephen and Melissa were murdered for something Hal did. After all, Stephen was working for him, and they were staying on his land. All right. He had done some threatening, right?
He threatened the guy that I got involved with, Alan Shadd. Alan was doing an offload in Sarasota. Well, instead of doing the offload and taking the stuff to he capped it, like 30,000 pounds. And then when finally he got a hold of him, Alan said, "Well, I didn't only take your shit out of your wife." And that's why he said if he ever got his hands on it, he'd kill him himself.
How much money are we talking about?
Around $9 million.
And that's enough to get you killed.
Yeah.
Man, I could see being so goddamn angry. Were you scared?
Yeah, I was, but this had nothing to do with that deal.
Since 1983 up till today, you've never heard that this was some kind of retaliation toward you or Alan?
No. And I would have heard it.
Hal exaggerates a lot, so it's kind of hard to tell what parts are true and what parts aren't. Alan Shadd was never charged with a drug crime. But Hal's right in that if this had been retaliation for something he'd done after 30 years, he would have gotten word about it, because there's no point in retaliating if the person doesn't get the message.
Today we got a real break in the case, the weather. It finally stopped snowing, and they were able to transport the original trailer that Melissa and Stephen were murdered in back to the ranch. Morning!
Morning, guys.
It's definitely the coldest crime scene I've ever been at -9. Very cold. Oh, wow. This is certainly not a very big trailer.
No.
All right, we know that Melissa was naked. I'm going to assume that they were probably back here in bed.
Yeah.
When that knock on the door came.
Did they go after Melissa because they wanted to kill Melissa, or did they go after Melissa because Melissa was a witness to what happened outside the trailer? That's what we have to try and figure out.
Okay. He comes out. Because you're trying to get me away from there, because Melissa's in there. You and I are disagreeing. I have something. Pick it up. I clobber you. You actually go down. Then, wham! Our killer then comes inside.
I think she's thinking it's Steve coming back.
Coming back in through the door. So she's laying here. She gets hit in the head.
Wham. She's startled. She's bleeding. She gets up. Get up. You're injured. And
I'm holding my head.
You're not going to fight.
She stumbles. She's touching.
Yeah.
And then there ends up being blood that was touched on the stove right here. And the blood's just streaming. She ultimately ends up in this bench and just bam, bam, just going at it on her.
Yeah.
It's a very small area. In fact, at one time, there was kitchen cabinets that were above the bench seats. The space is so small and the cabinets are so low, most people would have a lot of trouble swinging anything in that small space. This strike ends up hitting, where is this exactly back here?
It's right up
in this area?
Above where Melissa's head was.
Okay.
It'd have to be a smaller person. It'd have to be in here.
These cabinets were only struck once and not multiple times. So it's going to be someone who's fairly small and can literally kind of crawl right in there over Melissa and keep striking her.
You've both worked a lot of cases. One of the things over the years has been this was a drug hit. Does this look like some type of retaliation drug hit?
Not to me.
Yeah, the stuff I've seen, they just take the gun, shoot them in the head, and leave. It's too messy. This isn't planned. I think it's something they got out here and just went into a rage and it happened. This is a very angry killer. It doesn't look like a professional murder to me. It doesn't look like a drug hit.
I'm just wondering why they didn't kill her back there. There's more space back there than up here.
Maybe our killer wanted to say something.
Are they
It's a
walking
game, too.
Melissa up and saying, look who I just found in here?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's it. Whoever the killer is, wants to make sure she sees what he looks like before she dies. Melissa is murdered on one of the bench seats right by the door. Now that I've been able to see the trailer, I think the point was for her to walk to the door and to look out and see Stephen murdered outside. This is not the type of thing that you would see on a drug hit.
You guys are going to take the little room with Linda?
Yeah, is the little room open?
It is.
You ready?
I am ready.
Hi, I'm Kelly. Nice to meet you. Come on in. Linda Snedeker and her husband Hal owned the ranch where Steve was living and working at the time. People say it was all the dope dealing at the ranch. They got the wrong guy.
My husband's not an angel, we all know that, but my husband's not capable. Never.
Okay.
If drugs had anything to do with it, I think we would just tell you. On the other side, Terry, she could get so mad that she didn't even remember what she did.
Yeah, you call it here a red-headed hothead with a blackout temper.
Yeah.
About 6 months before the murder, Linda was a witness to Terry's temper firsthand.
She pulled in the driveway to talk to Stephen, and they were yelling, and then she rolled Stephen's arm up in the window and was dragging him down the street.
Like he's just kind of going down the road like this.
Yeah,
in the window?
we were like freaking out. So.
And you saw it.
Yeah.
I don't think we've heard anybody say they saw it. Everybody has
heard it.
Heard it.
How far?
Quite a ways.
Stephen ended up with a broken arm from that incident, and that shows how violent Terry can really be. The day before everything happens, what do you remember about any conversations with any of these people?
Terry called that night and said, I need to find Stephen. I have to find him now. She was just frantically trying to find Stephen. I just kept saying, I don't know, Terry. Probably at the camper.
Linda also tells us that the morning after the murder, she got another very strange phone call from Terry.
What did she say? Something like, I heard something had happened. And I said, yeah, Terry, Stephen was murdered at the ranch. She's like, oh, I better get an attorney, hadn't I? Not any emotion, not, oh my God.
The man she'd been looking for so desperately the night before.
Nothing.
Linda's stories raise some real questions about Terry's behavior, but we have to take them with a grain of salt because her husband is also possibly involved. So we need to find some other witnesses who know about Terry's actions around the time of the murder, who have nothing to gain from all this.
I'm Adam DeCamp. I'm with the Division of Criminal Investigation.
I'm Kelly. Patty Grayson and Terry were friends back in '83, and she's agreed to talk to us. What do you remember about March 3rd?
I get a phone call from Terry, and she wants to know if her Girl Scout cookies are ready. Girl Scout cookies? I said, you know what happened? Yes. Don't worry about your Girl Scout cookies.
She has no grief about anything.
And I also heard that right afterwards, instead of going to the hospital or the mortuary or anywhere, she went right to her lawyer.
Okay.
And then, it wasn't just a few days after the murders, Terry was out there because Stevie had his top off of his blazer. It was starting to snow or something, and she didn't want it to get wet.
And she's going to get the blazer, so...
And she told me, I tried to get in the camper, but the door was locked and there was blood on the windows.
Did she ever get upset?
Never.
Emotional?
Nothing. Nothing.
Terry's reaction to the death of her husband is very suspicious, but we're going to need a little more than just strange reactions if we're going to figure out who killed Steve and Melissa. In 1983, Steve Fisher and Melissa Gregory were beaten brutally to death, and their killer or killers have never been caught. Two of our suspects are Terry Sapino and her twin brother, Tim.
You can sit over there. Allison, this is Kelly. She's helping me with the case.
Hey, how are you? Allison Simmons. One time had a job at a cleaners with Terry.
We were just sitting there talking one day about having bad husbands, and she said that she'd killed somebody.
This is a huge development in our case. We actually have found a witness who heard Terry brag about killing someone. Talk about the conversation as best you can remember and how the words exactly came out of Terry's mouth.
Terry says, I killed somebody. She said, we killed him. We got rid of him. And then she talked about her brother because I knew she had a twin brother.
Okay.
And, you know, and I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, you know.
Allison's conviction about what she heard that day is going to make her a great witness.
Terry said it. I know she said it.
This whole town has thought for 31 years that it's a drug-related hit. And there's Hal Snedeker, the man behind all the rumors and a suspect for all this time. What are y'all's thoughts now?
I think if it was connected to something that group had done, they would have been notified. You know, look what happened there, you're next.
I agree with Johnny. We've asked them over and over, was this a retaliation type hit? And they've never heard that.
I know everybody's going to say, well, Stephen was a snitch. You know, that might be a legitimate reason to kill him, but they wouldn't have done it there, and they wouldn't have done it that way.
Yeah. The man lost everything because of this, and I think all those rumors started because of Terry to deflect off of her.
Yeah, but if we mark him off the board, we're saying we don't think he had anything to do with it any kind of way whatsoever at all.
I don't.
You don't. Do you?
No.
Do you?
No.
Do you?
Take him off the board.
All right. This now leaves Terry Sapino and her twin brother Tim as our main suspects. So we need to talk to them.
They're gonna go past that side street, and then it'll be on the other side of that yellow house.
Hi, John Halferty with the Sheriff's Office in Newton.
You're Tim?
Tim.
Johnny Bonds.
Oh.
They've asked me to come up and help work on this case.
The only thing I can tell you is Terry and I were there that night. Terry had called. She said, can I go run by the house? I said, yeah, I'll pick you up. So we went out to the ranch. I went and got Steve, and he stood outside the car and talked while I was standing at the Bronco.
And they had the conversation at the car door?
He stood right there and bent over the window.
You remember how he's dressed?
I remember jeans and nothing else.
Did y'all know Melissa was there that night?
I think she was, because Steve made damn sure he closed the trailer behind him, and he pushed me out of the doorway. He didn't want Terry going in there to talk to him.
But did you know that she was mad at Steve and Melissa?
She was so set on doing what she had to do to get back together.
She was set on reconciling.
When the conversation was over with Steve, was she upset?
She wasn't screaming, but, you know, silent rage is just as bad.
I was very surprised. I didn't expect him to be cooperative. He tells us that he actually dropped Terry off at their brother Carlo's house, and he didn't see her again until the family meeting the next morning.
Terry said, what do we do about last night? I said, we have got to tell somebody we were there. I'm right, no way. I said, okay, what's going to happen if they find out later that you were out there and you didn't say anything? Well, I guess that wouldn't look too good.
The reason that Terry's a suspect is, one, she had motive. Stephen was the dog. He's dogging around on her. She had the opportunity. I mean, y'all were after that.
No, there's no doubt about that.
And she's a fighter.
He's not overly protecting Terry.
No, he's not.
Any question about did any of your family members do it? After March, I've had no idea.
Yes. March 3rd, 2013 was the 30-year anniversary of Melissa and Steve's death. At that time, the Jasper County Sheriff's Department re-interviewed Tim and Terry about their activities that night. They asked him some really hard-hitting questions, and they also laid out for him all the reasons why his sister Terry could be involved in this murder.
30 years, that never bothered me. And in March, it started, as soon as they said family, I thought, could it really have happened? And now I don't know.
Now he knows. Tim has always been a suspect in this because he's the one who drove Terry to the ranch that night.
Thanks, Tim.
But if we think that he's telling the truth and all he really did was take her there and drive her home, we need to consider the possibility that Terry might have gone back to the ranch herself later on that night and that Tim Sapino had nothing to do with it. Somebody left us a letter. We came in this morning to find a letter from one of Jasper County's Sheriff's Office guys.
I want to take a moment to thank you and your team for your efforts. I know the sheriff has spent many hours praying about this case, asking for the big break. John Halferty is a man dedicated to the job. He has our support because of who he is and the leader he has become. If you ask any of the deputies, we would go to hell and back with him. You have our support and our prayers. God bless and good luck, Lieutenant Aaron Groves.
Wow.
Very nice.
Very, very nice. Your department thinks a lot of you.
This is a guy that wants a raise, I can tell.
The murder that happened at Copper Dollar Ranch got everybody's attention. It's a nice, quiet town where violence doesn't happen. And to see 2 teenagers beaten to death in the manner they were in 1983 was huge. And now it's time for us to talk to our prime suspect, Terry Supino.
Terry?
Oh, God.
Can we talk to you?
Yeah, hold on a second.
Terry has spoken to investigators many times in the last 31 years, and her story has changed more than once. She gives different reasons for why she went out there that night, and she's also inconsistent about where she was when she spoke to Stephen.
I know that you and Stephen were married. I know that he had a girlfriend and that you went out there that night.
I decided that since he was such a prick to me all the time that I'd just be a bitch and go out there and, you know, talk to him, piss him off a little bit more.
So she went out there all stirred up.
You had more motive than anybody else.
Not really.
Yeah.
The drugs are a lot of the motive, too, and you guys don't even want to look into the drugs.
I actually have looked very closely into the drugs.
No, I don't think you have. I'm telling you, this Copper Dollar Ranch thing goes way beyond what you guys are even... It goes up, it goes through the lawyers, it goes through the judges, it goes through the government.
Let's go back to that day.
Tim went up and knocked on the door. He said, Terry wants to talk to you. So I went up there to the trailer door, and he came outside.
Tim says she stayed in the car.
And they had the conversation at the car door?
He stood right there and bent over the window.
In your first statement, you said you talked to him sitting in the car.
No, I did not. I said that I was out talking to him in front of the camper. And I put that in my statement, and if somebody changed it, that's not my problem.
If Terry did, in fact, make multiple trips to the ranch that night, it's possible she's getting the trips mixed up in her head. One of the things I look at when I look at an unsolved murder is who has a motive.
Well, of course I have motive, because I'm the wife.
Well, and you're the wife that has been jilted. He's with another woman.
You know, I wanted to get a divorce. I wanted it to go through.
So you didn't...
would not allow it to go through.
Instead of getting a divorce from him, it appears to me that you actually were trying to get back with him.
No, I wanted a divorce.
This is yet another part of her story in direct contradiction to what Tim says.
She was so set on doing what she had to do to get back together.
So you didn't want to have anything to do with him?
Mm-mm.
They found his semen on a pair of your blue jeans, and you said you went out there and...
Yeah, well, I had to play the game, okay? Do you understand? Because if I would have said no, you probably would have tried to kill me.
So you're afraid of Steve. Why did you go out there that night to piss him off? I don't understand
I don't either.
I haven't understand it from the day I picked
Well,
this
I don't
case
understand it either, okay?
In my 22 years of all the criminal cases that I prosecuted, I have never seen a suspect talk so willingly, so much, and say such crazy things.
They're taking shit out of my statements or adding stuff in to make me look even guiltier.
After more than 2 hours, the more Terry talks, the more her logic just falls apart. So now it's just a question of how many things can she say that are inconsistent with what all the witnesses have to say, and with what she herself has said in past statements.
The next morning, you called Linda Snedeker.
No, I didn't call her. Never talked to Linda Snedeker.
You didn't call her the night before looking for Steve?
No. I might have called, well, wait a minute now. I might have called over there looking for him at their house.
Terry called and said, I need to find Stephen. I have to find him now.
You know something that I've learned over the years talking to people?
What?
They always remember the truth. People that lie have a hard time telling the same lie over and over again.
Well, I'm not a liar,
varies.
okay? I never have been a liar, so I don't appreciate you sitting there accusing me of being one.
All right, I'm telling you, you are the prime suspect in this murder case. I'm telling you right now. All right, listen, I think you did it.
I didn't do it, so
tell me.
Oh, crap. Is that Brett?
Don't.
Things got a little strange when Terry's boyfriend showed up.
Don't start.
Shut up.
Don't start.
Okay.
Don't start.
Hey, let's just
don't
stay.
Don't look at me. Step out. Step out. Best thing you can do. Get over.
Anyway, what?
He's a loose cannon.
I'm thinking, what's about to happen here? Is he going to yank her out? Is he going to hit her? Is he going to come after Johnny and Adam?
Please,
Brett,
don't.
Step out.
Hey, all we're trying to do is just get this over and done with. That's it.
Let's go for it.
Brett.
Step
Okay.
out. Step out.
Brett, don't.
Step out.
Brett,
Step out.
Don't, okay?
We're in the middle of interviewing Terry Supino, our prime suspect in Melissa and Stephen's murder, when her boyfriend interrupts and insists on getting in the car.
You come in here hollering, that isn't going to work. I'll tell you right now, that's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
You go for it.
Fortunately, the interview was just about over, but Adam had one more really good question.
And you're how tall? 5 foot?
5 foot.
Not even?
Maybe 5'1", maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What's the deal with the couple darn that?
No, it's two unsolved murders.
Yeah.
Period. We don't know who did it or
I'm
why.
suspect, okay? I did it, all right?
Oh, my goodness.
Can we count that?
There, we ain't got anything else.
With this interview from Terry Supino, the inconsistencies in what she said, and all the witness statements we have from everyone else involved,
Hi, guys.
we feel that Sheriff Halferty now has sufficient evidence to present this case to his county attorney.
Scott Nicholson, county attorney.
In the hopes that one day they'll be able to obtain a conviction against Terry Supino for the murders of Stephen and Melissa. Well, I would say you start with motive. And in the whole world, the only person who wants both Steve and Melissa dead is Terry Supino.
People think, this little 5 foot tall, 90-pound girl is not capable of this. That's incorrect.
Yep.
If you hit someone hard enough and stun them, from there on out, the game's yours.
Yeah, and this has to be a pretty small person.
Anybody of real height wouldn't have gotten under this actual shelving unit.
And I'm just going to single out Allison Simmons.
And she said that she'd killed somebody.
And now you have Tim Supino.
It was his idea to let law enforcement know that they'd gone out there.
I said, we have got to tell somebody we were there. I'm not, no way.
It's the first time that he really considered that maybe somebody in his family did do this.
30 years that never bothered me. And now I don't know.
This is at the best point that we've ever been. It's more clear than it ever has been.
It does seem much more positive after y'all come here.
I agree. This is the first time this case has been presented to us. I think we've got a little more work to do, but we're ready to go forward with charges in this case.
Ready to go forward?
Great.
This town is going to be ecstatic.
It's been long enough. It's time to take that step, and we're going to do it. This has been a long time coming, 31 years, mainly for the families of the victims.
That's going to be a satisfying arrest.
And we're excited to be able to move forward and also tell them that. How have you guys been doing this week?
Not eating, not sleeping. Kind of just like the day that we found out.
Right.
It's hard to go back. It really is.
Well, I can tell you something very positive. We met with the county attorney's office today and presented the information to them, and we were finally able to move forward and arrest Terry Supino for Steve and Melissa's murders.
Tana, you okay?
My mom. Wish she was here, but I know she's here. She's with us, Sissy. She knows.
I always wanted a resolution for Thelma and Ida, especially, and we weren't able to get that. But
they're still looking down.
You're right.
They'll know.
You're right.
Yeah, they know. Thank you.
It's all good. Okay. Keep your heads up.
For the last 31 years, the deaths of Stephen and Melissa have weighed heavily on the Fisher and Gregory families. Since the bodies of Stephen and Melissa were discovered, the Jasper County Sheriff's Office has remained dedicated to assuring that this case was never forgotten. After completing hundreds of interviews and processing evidence, today, exactly 31 years later, we are announcing the arrest of Teresa Supino on 2 counts of murder in the first degree for the death of Stephen Fisher and Melissa Gregory.
Thanks for coming.
I knew this day would come someday. I dreamt of it.
Yeah, I just had to wait patiently.
Jerry? Good, man.
Thank you. None of us can ever understand what they've gone through, losing Melissa and Stephen at such a young age.
Hi, brother.
The least that we can try and do for them is give them answers and let them be in a courtroom one day to see the person responsible be sentenced and be punished. We can do that much for them, or try to.